Today we're talking brain implants. Always trust the process. Welcome to another episode of Trust the Process, a podcast produced by the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship. My name is Chris, and I'm the host around here. Today's show features Neurobionics, a company focused on building neural interfaces.
Hi, my name is MJ Antonini, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Neurobionics.
Hi, my name is Nicky Driscoll, and I'm the co-founder and CTO of Neurobionics.
Neurobionics are alumni of our Delta V Accelerator program. They've developed a new kind of neural interface using hair-thin, flexible, bioelectronic fibers that seamlessly integrate with the human body. Maybe we could just talk a little bit about the device that you're developing. Could you give me your elevator pitch, and then I'll ask you some questions about it.
Sure, yeah. So a quick elevator pitch. So what we're developing is a device for endovascular neuromodulation. Those are two very big words. Essentially, neuromodulation is a therapeutic modality by which you use electrical stimulation to modulate some tissues, either brain or nerves, muscle, for therapeutic applications. We're actually specifically focusing on a type of neuromodulation, which is called deep brain stimulation, or DBS, which is most commonly used today for Parkinson's disease, essential tremor, and epilepsy. And there's a lot of other indications that it's being explored for. DBS works really, really well. It helps alleviate the symptoms. It helps eliminate seizures in folks with epilepsy. But one of the biggest challenges is that today you have to have a very, very invasive surgery to get DBS. It's a craniotomy, an open brain surgery that you're actually awake during. So it's scary, it's traumatic. A lot of these patients are elderly and they may not be healthy enough to have such an invasive surgery. And so what we're developing is a device that can deliver stimulation in the brain, but it goes through an endovascular process, which means you have a tiny incision, insert a catheter, navigate it up into the brain, and then deliver this device inside a blood vessel. It's actually very similar to like cardiac stenting. It's very similar to that. So it's a much less invasive procedure. And our hope is that it can really, really expand access to DBS, which again is a therapy that works really well. But right now, there's like less than 1% of patients who actually might benefit from DBS actually end up getting it today. And so we're trying to make it so much less invasive that it can be more widespread.
And so was a part of your Delta V experience finding that particular market?
Yeah, definitely. One of the main challenges we had during Delta V is that Delta V has the first month focusing on finding new customers and then crafting the product and crafting the business. And for us, because we are really hard tech, based on a decade of research at MIT, we had the problem of having a very versatile technology that could do a lot of things. And we spent a lot of time, I think now like 200 plus conversation with clinicians and other stakeholders to really understand what would bring the most value to them and what would be the best unmet need we could address with that technology. And that was during the Delta V. So both during the course of the Delta V, where we were learning and crafting a product and about the business, like building the business, we were also refining our beachhead market and defining what would be the focus of the use case of our technology.
Can you explain some of the difficulties you had in identifying the beachhead market?
Yeah. So as MJ alluded to, our technology can do a lot of different things. So the core technology behind Neurobionics, we have a way to make these very thin fiber devices. And to date, as MJ said, we've developed this technology for about 10 years now in Polina and Akiva's lab at MIT. We've done a lot of different things with those fibers. We have incorporated electrodes that can both record and stimulate. We've incorporated microfluidic channels that can do localized drug and gene delivery. And we've incorporated optical waveguides. So you can do light delivery, you can even do some light recording. So when we started Delta V, we said, great, we have this like super versatile technology. It can do all these different things. There are many applications for this in the healthcare system for various forms of medical devices. And so what was really challenging is like one of the first days of Delta V, we sat down in one of these rooms and we filled an entire wall of whiteboard of potential applications of this technology. And so it really took a long time of a lot of conversations with different clinicians to narrow down on where this technology had the most compelling value proposition and where it had its most unique, real value add. So that took a long time because we really just had so many different potential applications of what this technology could do. And it took some time and a lot of conversations to really hone in on what that killer beachhead market was going to be.
And I'd imagine that the use that you were most excited about did not end up becoming the one that you were using it for. Not academically excited about is the way that I mean it. Was there?
So I guess yes and no. Academically, we wanted to find a use that would leverage every single feature of our technology, and we still have a plan to get there. I think the use case that we ended up with is the one that we were very excited about because it has a lot of potential. It really opens up a platform technology and accessing to the brain and the periphery, and provide therapeutic benefit to a whole host of clinical indication. So we could help a lot of different diseases, treating them using that technology. So while we were crafting our plan and the platform play, we have this vision of eventually leveraging every single aspect of the feature that we've been developing at MIT. But that's the very, very long-term vision. In the short-term vision, we are building the access route, which is the endovascular neuromodulation.
One thing that I will say, what we landed on, this idea of endovascular neuromodulation, I talked about how at the beginning of Delta V, we filled the whole whiteboard with ideas. That one actually was not on there at the beginning. That is something that came out through conversations with surgeons. And multiple times they're like, you've got a really thin fiber. You could build an endovascular device with that. Initially, endovascular wasn't even really on our radar. It was just a lot of conversations with clinicians about how there's this huge, rapidly growing field of neurointerventional surgery. So doing minimally invasive surgeries in the brain through catheters that go through blood vessels. It's a pretty new medical field and it's growing really, really rapidly, largely in response to new techniques in how we treat stroke, going in and aspirating clots out when someone has a stroke. And so, really this came from a lot of the conversations that we had. And because we're in the medical field, when coming back to this question of market segmentation and choosing your beachhead market, there are a lot of other factors that go into it. There's the regulatory pathway. So what is this going to look like to go through the FDA? Is this a class 3 device? Is this a class 2 device? That's hugely important. And also, to your point, what type of clinician will you be working with? Are you going to be working with cardiologists? Are you going to be working with neurosurgeons? Are you working with neurologists? And the reason I bring that up is it actually makes a huge difference. Some of those classes of physicians are more willing to adopt new technologies than others. And so we've heard, very different things about, okay, neurologists hate adopting new technology. They really are not super open to trying new things. Neurosurgeons, total opposite. And neurointerventional radiologists, that field is so new and growing, they're adopting new technologies all the time. So they're really open to learning these new things. And so those were all kind of factors that had to be put into this matrix as we were making these decisions.
Some of the things that you just brought up are hard to quantify, right?
Yes.
The willingness of certain specialties to adopt new technologies. Yep. You could pay a consulting firm a lot of money and they wouldn't actually be able to give you an answer, right?
That's something we considered. we a couple of consulting firms reached out to us we can do the market segmentation for you and give you analysis 3 months from now, and it was $50,000, $100,000, and we're wow, that's a lot of money where we are at the beginning of our journey, and we decided to do that ourselves, and I think that was a very good decision because now we are very confident in our decision, and also build the network of people we can now reach back out to, and some of them were early investors, some of them are now our champions. We hopefully going to do some clinical trials with some of them, so it's that network and that exercise was really valuable.
And what it makes me think about is that from the lab where you're bringing the technology from, you're looking at a discrete problem, that's an oversimplification, but like, does it work how you want it to work? And now you're adding these secondary questions like, does it work? If it works, who might use it? And who of those people who might use it would be the most likely to adopt it? So like all of a sudden, you're adding many different dimensions to that question that in the lab is very discrete.
There are so many different dimensions in terms of the device. It's not so much just like, will my device work? That is step one. And then there's 8 other things that are really important before your device or your business can actually be successful. And in the medical field, there's a lot of different stakeholders. And so that's really challenging. So not only does it work and is it safe, right? So that's first step, get through the FDA, get approval for your device, which is it's safe and it works, hopefully. Then you need to drive adoption. So then do I have clinicians who are actually willing to use my device? Not only that, do the stakeholders at the hospital who make decisions about which medical devices they buy and offer in their hospital, are they willing to adopt it? Are other clinicians, so maybe you have a referral pathway, maybe a neurologist needs to refer a patient for this device that a neurosurgeon is going to implant. Are they willing to refer their patients? And then a whole other class of stakeholders is the payers, which in our healthcare system, these are the insurance, Medicare, and private insurance. And are they willing to provide coverage for your device, your procedure? And so in the medical device space, this becomes incredibly complex because does your device work and is it safe is just a tiny, tiny, tiny part of it. It's also all of these other stakeholders, and you need to have really strong healthcare economics arguments for why this makes sense for clinicians and hospitals and payers to adopt this and actually really bring this into the market.
Do you have a new perspective on the efficiency of the American healthcare system having gone through this medical device process?
I'm starting to. It's really hard to bring a new medical device to market.
Yeah.
Who or what do you get the feeling set up the biggest roadblocks?
I wouldn't frame it as a roadblock. It's more of an inherent complexity of the system. The American healthcare system is so fragmented that, as Nicky was saying, like there are so many different stakeholders that have different incentives, and we need to make sure that everyone is aligned and everyone works well together, and that we provide benefit to every single one of them. Some means money, some means less time in the OR, some means a better clinical outcome, some means a more comfortable procedure. And this fragmentation that might not exist in other countries where the healthcare system is a little bit more centralized and integrated, I think had an additional layer of complexity. So I wouldn't say it's a roadblock, but it's playing with the rules of the game and the boundaries condition that we have here.
Complex systems are complex, but it also allows you to form complex and innovative solutions, right?
I think we could benefit from less complexity. I feel like bringing a class 3 implantable device to market has a lot of technical, scientific, and regulatory complexity. But then on top of that, there's going to be the reimbursement, the marketing. It's already hard. I think we would benefit from a little bit less complexity in some of the aspects. But I mean, this is how the system is, and this is what it takes to bring a device to market, and that's something we're happy to do.
The caveat is we're early in this process, so we're very much still building the device and doing the early. Is it safe? Is it effective? Some of these other questions of market adoption will come several years down the line for us. But from what I've learned over the last year and a half, I think one of the things that is the hardest in terms of bringing a new medical device to market is the reimbursement part. So will insurance cover your device? Because, as an entrepreneur, you're always told, okay, who are your customers? Who's paying for it? In the medical device world, that's typically insurance companies and payers. So that's one of the most challenging things, because you can have a device that works really, really well, that sails through the FDA, it's approved, it works, it's safe, but insurance companies could choose to not pay it because it's not, or not cover it rather, because it's not as lucrative for them, or there's some other reasons your device is too expensive, and that will kill a business. And so that's really challenging, and that's something we're going to encounter a little later in our journey.
Like, what kind of places do you pitch after you leave Delta V? Like, how does that happen? Where do you go?
You want to start?
Sure. I mean, after Delta V, we've done a couple additional competitions. One big, actually two accelerators, one of which was M2G2, and the other one we are currently doing is MedTech Innovator. So those are very involved, very good, very high quality, and very focused on MedTech device. And we had to pitch for those as well. And then in addition to that, like a lot of pitching for investors, just like getting all those conversations going. So yeah, a lot of practice there.
The context has varied a lot. A lot of the pitching to investors is online these days, so on Zoom or other video platforms. We've also done a lot of in-person pitching. As MJ mentioned, some of these accelerator programs, you're pitching in person, either up on a stage to a big audience, or we've even had some where it's like little round table mini pitches, and then you have a Q&A with judges, and then you switch to another table. And then we've had some pitches in kind of bigger audiences. So we've pitched in a lot of different contexts, which I think is helpful. You know, you kind of learn how to be present and have a stage presence in different contexts and with different size crowds.
Yeah. And Delta V was definitely the first one that was like, oh wow, it's big, it's real, and then kind of like set the tone for everything else. That was really good.
What do you still like sort of remember about demo day? I guess the first thing I'll ask is which of you spoke at the event? Okay,
I did. Well, I remember being very, very stressed. That's for sure. I was the first person to pitch at demo day in 2023. So yeah, plus I'm French, so I have an accent. So like I had to like remember the pitch, plus remember to like enunciate everything clearly. So yeah, I remember like it being stressful, but then with practice, like when it started, like my brain just shut off and I just like delivered the pitch, and I think it went well.
But you still exist as a company.
It's still, yeah. So yeah, at least it didn't kill us, so it was good. But yeah, no, it was, and I was impressed by everyone else's pitch. That for sure. Like it was the delta between how people were pitching during the prep and on stage was very, very big, and how like Bill and Paul, like everyone was like comfortable on stage. It was like really, really cool.
It was a really high energy event, which was a lot of fun.
I think what having done a lot of these interviews with folks that are working on startup companies is I've noticed that sort of like a prerequisite for being successful in startups is that like you have to believe that the next decision is always going to like make or break your company. But like in retrospect, it doesn't. It really isn't. It's not fully true, but it is true at the same time. That's not a good way to describe or ask the question, but I think that you're going to get where I'm coming from. Is like, how do you work through that as a founder? Like, how do you both acknowledge that these decisions are potentially very large decisions, but also recognize that like you have to keep making them regardless of whether the last one was perfectly made?
I'll take a little detour from that question first, and then I'll circle back. So one of the things that we have been so grateful for in coming out of the MIT entrepreneurship ecosystem is the sheer number of amazing mentors and network that we've picked up along the way. And so I think when we approach really big decisions that feel very high stakes, what we have really tried to do together is make sure that we're doing as deep a diligence and homework on that before we make a decision. And so we end up asking a lot of mentors and other founders, their opinion, their input, and really make sure that we've kind of like done our research and come to the decision that we feel the best about. But to your other point, also being comfortable with just moving forward and continually moving forward. And even though sometimes you have to make decisions quickly and they feel like they're going to have a big impact, you can't like dwell on, oh, okay, I wish I had done that differently. You just kind of have to keep moving forward and keep trying to do everything to the best of your ability. And I think we always try to work together when we have these big decisions to be made. So we have like a weekly strategy dinner where we go over some of the big high impact questions, and we have to make big decisions like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think to add to that, I think one of the key prerequisites of being an entrepreneur is resilience. And it goes into like, well, a lot of decisions you're going to make are going to be not make and break, but like can significantly impact the direction of the company. And there are going to be great decisions, there are going to be not so great decisions. But at the same time, there are so many plates spinning at the same time, and so many aspects of the company that are like moving forward that you don't have to have time to dwell on a wrong decision and just like have to move on. And to echo what Nicky was saying, like the mentorship that we've been lucky to leverage within the like MIT Delta V and outside as well was really, really key. And even like now, like we talk to Bill like every other month, the entrepreneurs in residence as well. We talk to them every time, like, oh, well, we'll have this term sheet. What do you think? What's the best response there? And like how to position ourselves for the next best move. So yeah, it's been really, we've been lucky.
Do you, do you feel like you are naturally predisposed to being able to make decisions and just go with it, or is that something that you've had to learn?
That's definitely something I had to learn. I think like as an academic, so both of us are academics, like a background. So in the lab and in research, like we have time to really, really ponder deeply into each decision and really like boil the ocean, like make sure that we make them the best optimum like decision and solution for our problem. In entrepreneurship, it's the opposite. Like we have to move very, very fast. Otherwise, opportunities will pass us by. And we had to learn how to, like what good enough is and be comfortable with that. And that's something I did not have before starting.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think we've definitely had to learn a lot of that on the go. And I think that we probably both a little bit struggle from a little bit of perfectionism and needing to step back from that to be a good entrepreneur, because you don't have time to get everything just perfect. You just need to make sure that you're doing everything as well as you possibly can, and just keep moving forward. So I think that's something that we've both worked on and actually learned a lot through Delta V on that as well. Even just prepping for board meetings and giving the final pitch is like, okay, it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be like as good as you can make it.
Yeah.
Within the constraints that you have.
With the only caveat, we're a medical device company, so like the product will have to be as close, as close as perfect as possible because it will impact humans' lives. But like business decision, hiring decision, fundraising decision, like all of those needs to be good enough.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess, can we talk a little bit about being someone who feels like they're coming from a PhD academia world into Delta V? How did you feel like your perspective was different than someone who was, like a Sloan Fellow, or, how were your questions different?
Came within Delta V because we heard a lot of good things, but with maybe a little bit of thinking like, oh, it's not that applicable to us because the 24/7 entrepreneurship are heavily through a lens of like B2B SaaS. And we're like, well, we are a medical device company. Like our timelines are a lot different, our requirements are different. We have to think about regulatory, we have to think about reimbursement. And we thought that we would be able to leverage part of Delta V, but a lot of that would not be applicable. And that was not true. That will 98% of what we learned through Delta V, I think, was applicable. And there was our year enough people in the cohort going through similar problems that even in the individual pod, we had the MediPod for medical device. And that was really, really valuable and really, like we were able to like get a high return on investment.
Yeah, and one other thing that I might add on to that, original question is the perspective of coming in from someone, coming in as a postdoctoral researcher, someone who's coming from academic background and having done a PhD. So we're both very technical minded and both very much thinking a lot about the science and the technology behind our products. And so coming into Delta V was really kind of forcing us to take the lens on the customer and the business and all of these other things that folks coming from Sloan have that drilled into them already. And like we had both had some entrepreneurial instruction before, but nothing super formal. And so we learned a lot of that through Delta V, and that was incredibly helpful.
I can imagine it's difficult to come from a system in which perfectionism is like almost, it's like baked into the system. It's not like, academia is not really a fair system, I think is what I'm trying to say. Because like everyone makes mistakes, but if you make a mistake at the wrong time, your career is over.
Yeah, I think, in other words, the embracing failures was something that is really like well accepted in the entrepreneurial world. And I think like in academia, we were not really, like experiments fail, for sure. But I think like the failure of a project and the failure of a like paper revision and so on was not as well, they're not celebrated at all. While in entrepreneurship, it felt like fail, but fail fast, and then learn, and then do something else, because there are many opportunities and many interesting problems and many solutions to develop. That at the end of the day, it's the learning that you take from what you're doing right now, and then you apply that for the next project and the next project and the next project.
I get bored very quickly, and that's why I have an MFA and not a PhD. But to me, frankly, it's like totally mind blowing that that you're comfortable thinking about things years ahead of time. Like, and I think for a lot of people, that is something that they would be like, what? Like what? How do you do that, right? How do you? If someone here is listening who's like me and they're like, they can't even plan what they're going to have for breakfast tomorrow, like, what are the tips and tricks that you have to help you do that?
Finding people who've done that before and have several like scars from going through that process, and then really instill I wouldn't say fear of the process, but like making it real for you. And I think that was like something that was really valuable for us, was really going through several like incubator and accelerator, and also finding several highly qualified advisors that laid out all of the problems that we're going to encounter and all of the things we have to think about, and really impressing upon us how important those considerations were, and they cannot be an afterthought. I think when maybe 20, 30 years ago, the FDA approval was like the big milestone. Now it's not that anymore. It's a reimbursement one. And that's something that we've learned to appreciate, because when we started, at least when I started, like I didn't realize that. I thought that once we had the regulatory approval, like we were all set, like the reimbursement would have been a piece of cake, and the marketing and so on, market adoption would be a piece of cake. And we've been learning over and over again that that's not going to be the case.
And I guess just to add on that, in terms of the long pathway that we have ahead of us, I think that is actually one thing where we both benefit from having come from academic backgrounds and having done PhDs, because we have learned what it means to work hard at something for several years that has a long timeline. And I think...
And no guarantee of success.
True. Yes, exactly. And just getting comfortable with that you're just going to grind, and you've got this big vision. It might be 5 years away, but you're just going to keep moving towards it. And I think in the context of neurobionics too, another thing that has been super important is mapping out our milestones and having both the long-term milestones, right? We've got these big milestones that are 4 or 5 years from now, but then within the next 6 months and a year, we've got all these really key milestones. So we have both the long-term vision and what it's going to look like for us to get this thing all the way to market and to adoption, but a lot of milestones in the near term, so that we can constantly see the progress and see really what are the key things that we need to do right now to make it to that end goal.
What are the things right now that you need to do? Like, what are you avoiding by doing this interview right now?
I think right now we are heavily focused on tech development. So we've got a core technology. We're going after this endovascular application, and there's some development work that we need to do to really optimize our technology and make it work really, really well in that context. And going along with that, because now we're building a medical device that needs to go through the FDA, there's just a lot more thought around how we're going to manufacture this thing at scale, how we're going to make sure that all of our materials are biocompatible. And so we're going through a lot of optimization of the core technology in the device right now. And that's going to be a big focus for us in the next year and a half, as we gear up and start doing some animal testing with this device and optimize it. And so that's a big focus right now in the near term.
Yeah. And in the non-technical side, I think hiring is going to be a big one. Like over the next couple of months, we're going to release a few job descriptions on our website and LinkedIn, because we're going to hire 2 key positions very, very soon. And in addition to that, it's also like always like fundraising. We've been in the process of fundraising and are about to close our seed round. And it's a challenging market out there, but there is a lot of interest. And this is something that from our academic background, we were not exposed to, and a lot of learning came through like this exercise of fundraising over the like past several months, and it's been good. And that fundraising process was also really, really helpful in crafting our plan, because a lot of the investors have a lot of knowledge, and I've seen those companies go through that process before, and they would like ask us questions like, "Oh, well, actually, that's something we haven't thought about just yet. Let us like think about it and then come back to you." And they were like really helpful.
Really? Yeah. So I just think I don't think we really touched on something that I like to talk about is where you come from much longer ago. So I'd like to ask if you could tell me about your parents, like an interesting story about your parents. We can start there. So we could just start, like, if you tell me their names is usually a good place to start. And then you can kind of just, give a little description of them.
Sure. I'll hop in there. My parents are Diana and Jim Driscoll. My mom was a dentist, but she actually stopped practicing when she and my parents had kids. And my dad works in construction, so bridge and highway construction, and has always been just an absolutely incredibly hardworking person. He runs a family-owned construction business in the Philadelphia area, and all throughout my life, he's like one of the hardest working people I've ever met. But he's, a businessman and is, really instilled that kind of like drive and hard work ethic into me.
Those are also very complicated projects.
Yes. With
lots of stakeholders. And like, I think of the book, The Power Broker, if you've ever read it, it strikes me that like the way that you're talking about this new entrepreneurial project that you're involved in is actually probably something that he could talk to us about as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think, civil engineering, bridge and highway construction, not only are there a lot of stakeholders, there's also like so many different people involved in the actual process, and different vendors and making sure that all the materials that you're getting are up to your standards and delivered on time. So there's just a lot of logistics. So yeah, absolutely. I think he would definitely have some good advice on that as well.
So with my parents, my mom is called MJ Antonini, and my dad is Charles Félix Gore. And so my dad is an engineer by training, and my mom is a nurse, which kind of like made me like in between both of them as a biomedical engineer. Aside through the engineering course, and then like take a left turn and then went into more the biospace. So like their background and like way of thinking like influenced a lot of how I've been thinking about problems and like where my interests lied, and are like definitely like a huge part of where I am right now and like why I'm focusing on the topics that I'm focusing on.
And what part of France did you grow up in?
I'm from a small island called Corsica.
Okay.
That's between France and Italy. It's pretty small. The city I'm from, there are like 60,000 people, Ajaccio, and left Corsica to do my like higher education. So after my baccalaureate, went to Marseille, then Paris, then came to the US for a short stint in Berkeley, and then went to Imperial College in London before going back to Paris for a little bit and then making my way to Boston 10 years ago. And I've been here ever since.
Well, that's it for another episode of Trust the Process, a podcast produced at the Martin Trust Center for MIT Entrepreneurship. My name is Chris Burns, and I produce the show. The show is executive produced by Greg Weimer. See you next time.